Here we are.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here.
Well, it's nice of you to ask. I was after I went, okay, so what? So why do you care?
Well, you know what? I'm a big fan of your work. I discovered Storm King Comics last year at a
Ah,
signing at Golden Apple. Because
great.
yeah, and that it kind of just took off. I'm obviously a big horror fan, and so yeah, just it means a lot that you're here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's always fun. I'm always interested. I spent most of the years of my career behind the scenes and and I'm kind of an old school producer where um, you put the other talent forward and you're behind the scenes like Oz. Um, so it's really funny for me now to be seen because in
Right.
comics, everybody wants to be part of your clubhouse. And Jimmy Palmiotti, when I was first at conventions and stuff, said, "Where's your photograph? Where's your picture? Where's that?" And I'm like, "Well, that's kind of not what I do." And he goes, "You got to do it. I want to see a picture up here next time. I want to see your name. I want to see." And I'm like, "That's kind of not me." And he goes, "Make it you." And he sat there, goes, "Take it or leave it. Fuck off." Oh, okay. And got drunk and took some pictures, with ravens and flames and stuff, because like that's the only way I can do that. And then kind of started to get used to the fact of this is that kind of change in entertainment.
Right.
And but I spent, all my other years of doing movies and doing animation and doing the other things I do with it not being my face.
Right.
So I
Right.
get surprised when anyone wants to know me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel the same way. I come from a small town in North Carolina. I live in LA now, but growing up in North Carolina, very small town, I was a musician, which was a breakaway from the norm because football was the thing.
Right.
And we would play shows in bars, and every weekend I started playing in bars when I was 12, and we would maybe sometimes have like 10 people show up. Then all of a sudden I did the television show The Voice, and that worked out
Right.
really well. And I show
Hey,
back up at
yeah.
home. I show back up at home, and all of a sudden all these people want to come to my shows, and I'm like, this is odd. Why do these people care?
Yeah, why do you care now?
Right.
That's always the funny part. I told my kids, because they're musicians, and I said, there may come a time where you do something everybody likes. Be prepared for them to not like you again.
Mhm.
And don't buy into it either way. Just you got to do your stuff, enjoy it, put your best stuff out there.
For
And
sure.
kind of, the rest of it is like you can rock, you can think you're the best thing on earth, and then you're not going to be able to get arrested or run over in the middle of the street next time out. And it's wonderful when people like you. It's wonderful, but like you said, you were doing the same music before The Voice
Mhm.
at kind of an anonymity. And then you come back and suddenly, because you were on TV,
Yeah.
your small town went, "Oh, you're so cool."
Yeah.
And you kind of go, "Yeah, fuck you." It's like, uh, it's it's this kind of love-hate thing where what you love is communicating, storytelling, whether it's through music or writing or anything, which means you are communicating. I came from being a painter. You want to talk
Mhm.
about being unappreciated?
Yeah.
Nobody gives a shit when you're a painter. Found out you can starve. The altruists that started out thinking I'd be a fine artist forever, and but you do it because you have something to say.
Mhm.
which implies that you need an audience,
Right.
which means and you respect that audience, but damn can they be mean.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, it's it's a revolving door um of just every emotion and every kind of person and every situation you have to deal with. But you know what? You take it as it comes,
Yeah.
and figure out how to navigate it. And especially in times like this, which is a big question I have for you, is how has your life changed, your routine changed since COVID started, since we've been in our houses?
Kind of hasn't, except that we can't actively shoot right now.
Mm,
I've got um, 3 TV series, and they're all just kind of like planes lined up on the runway waiting to take off. Um, they, they're past the Starbucks phase, they're past the studio phase, they're at the networks, so they're real.
hmm
Um, but again, they're like Schrodinger's cat. They're neither alive nor dead until you're actually shooting.
Right.
Um, and it's all the plus side of it is you have the luxury of getting all the scripts in, everything more fine-tuned, everything really ready to go. So my end, which is really doing all that prep work that takes a long time and should take longer in more cases than the studios usually want to give it, we're getting done.
Right.
Um, and then in comics, we work remotely anyway. I've got artists and writers all around the world, literally. So all that goes on. The glitches there were there's only one distributor who has a monopoly on distribution, and they're assholes. So they summarily decided they weren't paying the publishers and that they weren't delivering the comics to the stores. So that was special. And are you frozen? Am I frozen?
I may be frozen as well. You are also frozen. I think we're
You're
both in
frozen.
a state of freeze together. Oh, you're back now.
Aha! So that's kind of like that's kind of like COVID. Um, so so um, the comics, in terms of their distribution and sales and income and stuff, that got hugely affected, but the production of them didn't get affected.
Right.
So that work still went on. Um, so my day, I keep the same schedule. I do the same things. Um, the office, I've got my my office core is working remotely for the most part. They're kind of
hmm
rotating, going into the office, making sure the mail's picked up, going into the warehouse, putting the comics there, getting the mail out orders from the web store done. But so we're locked down and dealing with that. But um, really, my schedule's the same. Production's still the same. Um, uh, my husband's not answering the door. It's, um, I'm,
as happens.
I'm waiting for assistance here from down below. He's showing up. The dog is doing, and I think it's the plumbers. This is the flaw in COVID.
Yeah, this is the Zoom flaw. Frozen
Yeah,
internet and other responsibilities at home.
and plumbers at the door with 3 cats, a dog, and hold on one second, John. Yeah. I need your help at the front door. I'm coming. Thank you.
You got it now.
Okay. Well, we have a multi-storied house, and now there's an entire welcoming committee at the front door of a Siamese cat, a black cat, a white dog, Um, we're about to have chaos.
Just a minute.
It's,
It happens.
yes, it does. And that's what's different about COVID and our business.
A perfect example.
Yeah.
We have a serviceman coming to the house sometime today, unannounced, and I was worried that it was going to happen in the middle of this, and I was like, oh no. So I think we may start our own club of plumbers coming to
Matching
the
plumbers
door.
and
Yeah.
matching, well, we have a Siamese that thinks it's a real laugh riot to bolt out the front door, run down Hollywood Boulevard, and yeah, it's like, this is not good for your health. This is a
Right.
really bad idea. So, okay, fine. It's still got plenty of room to go to hell. Okay, I'm going to try not to pay attention.
There you go.
And okay.
Alrighty. Okay, so I want to ask you about horror.
Yeah.
When that became a thing in your life.
From when I was 10 years old. Sorry.
No, you're all good.
No, I read Frankenstein, the original Frankenstein, when I was 10. And I just thought that was the greatest thing ever.
Mm.
Then Dracula, then Island of Dr. Moreau. Then, I couldn't get enough of those kinds of stories.
Right.
And for me, it's an allegorical medium. You can say so much about the world. You can, if you make Gandhi your preaching to the converted, they already, it doesn't mean that Gandhi isn't a great movie, but it means the people going to see that already have that mindset,
right,
for the most part. If you make They Live, you can talk to a whole other audience that thinks they're going to see, a big action film and all of that, and it's actually political satire and you're telling a different tale, and you maybe can have some introspection on another level without preaching. If you want that, he's right there. If you want to, there we go. If you want to talk to disaffected youth who have a myriad of problems, feeling like they don't fit in, you can give them the Bernie Wrights and Steve Niles Frankenstein.
right.
And what speaks to them more than a creature who is beautiful in the eyes of his creator, who doesn't realize until he encounters the outside world that he's seen as a monster, and then looks at himself reflected in the water and sees a monster. There's a way to speak to any kid and why they feel like a fish out of water through Frankenstein.
Right.
So there's tales that you can make timeless. There's things you can address in people's hearts through horror.
Right.
And have them come out safe on the other side or feel spoken to.
Yeah.
That's bigger than, splatterpunk. That's bigger than, what, say, the money grabbers think horror is. That's what speaks to me, and that's how I got into horror.
Now, did that naturally lead to I've read the source material, Frankenstein, Dracula, I'm going to see the movies now? Or when did you, when was that a thing, the horror films?
Oh, I think as soon as I could get away with it. I, of course, tried to see, I would sneak things at other people's houses, on sleepovers, and then scare the pants off myself, and then get nightmares. And then my mother would give me a big talking to about, well, see what happens. And then I'd wait a while and then I'd dive right back in and, watch something, usually really bad ones on TV, on what was then Channel 11, because that was back in the days of like 5 channels, and black and white movies late at night, and then it really stuck watching the original Thing when I was about, again, it was right around being, 10, I think everything struck, and that was just it. I was in.
Right. That was my age, I think. I was 9 years old, and I saw A Nightmare on Elm Street for the first time, which is, a generation after the black and white
Yeah, different.
movies. Um, but that started off, it was full, snowball running down the hill at that point. It was just like, I love this, and I don't know why I love it, but I think it looks cool, and it freaks me out, and my heart starts racing, and I like that for some reason. And then, the older you get, the more you start understanding the sociological and political implications of what you're watching, and you're like, oh, now I feel smart. and and I like that. I like to feel smart.
Well, particularly like in the 80s, the guys, John was talking about, who are you? What is it that makes you human? You have Cronenberg talking about body horror and body alienation. And you had George Romero talking about society. So all these guys were talking about something else, and
Right.
then telling a cool tale on top of that. And sorry for the chorus in the
No,
background.
you're all good.
And you know, I think that the stuff. My goal is always to do something that will stick with you. And then there's the other side that's just the roller coaster, where you
Hmm.
get to scare the pants off yourself, think you're going to die, and come out triumphant on the other end. Yeah,
Right.
everybody wants to come off that roller coaster heroic and go, yeah, I did that.
Totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's certainly a big feeling involved on my end as well. Now, before we delve into comic books completely, I have to ask, because it is one of my favorites from one of my favorite people. Looking at your IMDb page, you worked on Rumblefish, which I think is
Oh, yeah.
a great film. Coppola, after post Godfather, post Apocalypse Now, decided I'm going to make 2 movies in one year, and went into Rumblefish just a few weeks after The Outsiders wrapped. And so I just want to know,
Got both movies at the same time.
yeah, that's amazing. And that's a crazy task to do. And so what is it like working with Francis Ford Coppola?
Well, it was really cool. I really had, it was, they were hard hours. I was averaging 108 hours a week.
Wow.
And it was one of the best experiences I ever had. I I was hired to do Rumblefish, and uh, Lloyd, I want to say Lloyd Nelson, but that's the actor. Lloyd somebody was the script supervisor on Outsiders,
Hmm.
and they had shut down Outsiders to do 2 weeks of rehearsals on Rumblefish. I flew into Tulsa, and we were doing the rehearsals for Rumblefish, and Lloyd had left, and then he never came back. So then I picked up and finished Outsiders,
Uh-huh.
and then we went and shot Rumblefish, and we did pickups for both movies. Um, and the big deal was the two textures were really different. Outsiders was the gold lame, colored, real, all ages, ultimate S.E. Hinton story. And then Rumblefish was the edgy one that was really had the look based on Bicycle Thief. And that was really inspiring from an artistic point of view, because we were recreating an era of black and white that was when there was more silver nitrate in the
Mhm.
film. And art department, Dean Tavaleras was uh, doing things like painting the shadows on the of branches and things like that on the sets.
Right.
And we were putting glycerin and glitter on the streets, not just doing straight wet downs, so they really sparkled at night. And and we were all living in this all Tulsa, Oklahoma for months.
Mhm.
And then at one point, Francis was having such a good time. He was talking about doing a third movie. And we said, we're all leaving. There's only so long we're going to stay in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And because Tulsa did not like us. And we were all moving out of the hotel that was hermetically sealed and stuff. And we were all moving out into condos and anything. And we were skydiving just to throw ourselves out of airplanes. We were doing anything. But, the caterer was flying to LA and coming back with sushi. And, but we were a really bonded team. And, everybody thinks Francis is really removed because of the stories about the silverfish, but he'd have these weeks of rehearsals beforehand where the
Mhm.
actors got to we would do video rehearsals with blocked out boxes and stuff to be the sets, and they had weeks to go through the script, do all these things, get all their yayas out that way. And then we were jamming through these scenes
Mhm.
when it was really in the actual locations. And so it was all great process. It was all real interesting. And then we did the pickup shooting in LA and on stages at Zoetrope. And to me, it was just a fabulous group of people, really creative. Steve Burum was the DP was fabulously interesting between him and the art department. Um, it was really cool. And you had these young actors who all became these giant stars and
Mhm.
are still these giant stars. So the casting was unique. Um, Things like the fight scenes were choreographed by a dancer along with the stunt coordinator. But so
Mhm.
they were dance moves, and you had um, um, uh, what's his name from the Stuart Copeland from the Police
Yeah.
drumming on the back of the insert car, drumming the rhythms while they were doing these things. So it was like,
Wow.
wow, this is cool. So I was exhausted, but it was inspiring. It was a great few months.
It sounds amazing. It's one of my favorite films. I love Coppola and his work. And so when I found that out, I was like, oh my God, I have to ask about Rumblefish because not enough people talk about Rumblefish. It's always the outsider, not enough Rumblefish. So,
Yeah,
um,
I don't know why that is. Rumblefish is artistically a more interesting film. The other is a more expected
mhm,
thing, which is probably why it. I mean, The Outsiders is the kind that when the book's assigned in high school to read, everybody goes and watches the movie.
right.
Uh, but the one that's real edgy and does some surrealistic stuff is Rumblefish.
It's a beautiful film. Comic books. What
Yes.
was the inspiration to get into comic books?
I got mad during a during a studio meeting for a series because I knew that the executives really they didn't really want to make this one story we had that had a bunch of artwork done to it and all that. I really felt the executives wanted to be they wanted, every once in a while you meet executives who what they really want to be as producers, and they they have no intentions of actually going into production on what you're doing. And then if they do, they want to go to the Carolinas and shoot non-union, and you're sitting
Right.
there going, okay, this story takes place in LA because it's hell on earth, and it has the Santa Ana winds and things when it's, the fires and everything are happening. And I'm trying to explain that location is a character, which now has become cliche that everybody says, but it really was. If you're going to have Satan coming through uh, to laugh at the city of angels.
Hmm.
And they were saying, well, it's not like it's a graphic novel or anything that we're matching to. And that moment was an aha moment for me where I went, actually, it is.
Uh-huh.
And at that moment, I had Thomas Ian Griffith, who was the master vampire in Vampires and was a partner in this project. And two agents, all kicked me under the table, going, what? And I walked out and they go, what was that about? And I go, it's a comic book, guys. And by the way, they're never going to shoot this. So give it up.
Right.
And I came home from the meeting and John said, so how'd it go? And I said, we're doing a comic book. He goes, what do we know about comics? I said, absolutely nothing, but we'll learn. And so I spent 2 years researching the business and the art of putting together comics. And I came from animation, which was not dissimilar in how it was put together with pencils, inks, and colors, that kind of thing. And what was different was how the writing goes and the page turns and the cliffhangers and those things. And we knew a lot of people in comics, just because our audience crossed over and our fans crossed over into even the writers. And we knew Steve Niles because he'd worked on Fear 3 with John, the video game. And they were all really generous with their advice, their time. And Bruce Jones came on, and in editing him on Asylum, I learned what worked.
Hmm.
And then I took over writing Asylum, which had been the story from John and Thomas and I. And we'd already, had created the characters and the story and that. And people have been asking John to put his name on comics for years, but they weren't good comics. They just wanted his name to sell them. So this seemed like the right time. And
Right.
it just seemed like, okay, let's do this. I mean, what's the worst? And, we'll be no good at it, but, no guts, no glory.
Totally. It's
And
all about risks.
it turned out we really liked doing it. And, so we did Asylum for a while, and then we didn't have anything for the comic shops when Halloween was coming out. I said, well, let's do a one shot, with like 3 stories in it, a floppy for Halloween for the comic shops. And we were at San Diego Comic-Con, and I always do a dinner down there for writers and artists. And everybody got drunk and everybody wanted in on it. So that was the first Tales for a Halloween Night, which was 6 stories. And then from that got a great response. And now that's the yearly anthology.
Hmm.
And we won awards. So I grew fangs going, well, that's cool. I never won awards. I want more. Yeah, that unleashed a monster. And more of the writers and artists were like going, well, you didn't ask me. I go, well, you weren't drunk that night. So, it was, now it's, the annual event to do the Tales for a Halloween Night.
Right.
And then again, as happens, at the conventions, looking at the table going, we don't have any science fiction. we're known for science fiction. So that's how Tales of Science Fiction came about. Then I realized everyone had their little kids with them, and our stuff's really for grown-ups. It's more existential. It's,
Mm.
you know, it's scary, but it's stuff that's scary to adults. It's not appropriate for kids. And part of it is they don't get it. They don't get what scares adults. And the
Right.
other part is it's stuff that little kids shouldn't have. So I started Storm Kids, and that was, we started out with a Steve Niles story, Monica Blue werewolf story for young adults. And then I got Louise Simonson in with a sci-fi story, Hyperbreed. And now we're going down and down. So now we have stories from 4 years old up.
Wow.
And it's things that are appropriate to the level of ages. So everybody gets a little something. So your littlest kid coming up to the table, can get Stanley's Ghost.
Mm.
Yeah, Stanley's Haunted House. Like, we changed the title so many times I can't remember if it's Stanley's Haunted House or Stanley's Ghost. But anyhow, that's got ghost bunnies in it. And then we've got Grimmstown Terror, which will be out in February. That's got a booger troll named Grub in it. And I just think you can't go wrong with a booger troll.
Right.
And,
Naturally.
and so, I think the whole point is you do what's appropriate for different age groups, but you have great writers. And we have some of the same writers that do the adult stuff, or some guys like Paul Story, who does Stanley, who's, specializes in kids' stories, or Neil Edmonds, who's doing Grimmstown Terror, who writes Power Rangers. So that we're trying to do the best and do good writing for those kids, and great art for all of it.
I mean, I think my introduction to horror was, scary stories to tell in the dark, and Goosebumps and all of that kind of stuff. And I really think that
Good.
Goosebumps is really good. And it was all, that was what was addictive to me in the beginning. And then, A Nightmare on Elm Street was game over. And yeah, then it was like, I get it now. I've moved up. Do you find yourself kind of wanting to push the envelope just a little bit into what you can fit into a kid's comic?
Yeah, I just want to make it good. I want them to have good literature and great art, the same way I do that for the adults.
For sure.
So, I looked at everything that was available to them, and I didn't think most of the publishers were trying hard enough.
Right.
I didn't think their standards were high enough. I mean, Goosebumps is good, but most of it, just like most of the horror comics, I mean, look, Joe Hill and those guys rock it out of the park. And the horror is getting better because people are understanding that more should be expected. But from when I was starting, the horror was pretty bad and the anthologies didn't exist. They're catching on that there's a good audience there, and the editors are getting better. I'm not the only game in town. But I think I have a different approach, and I think I choose differently, and I choose art differently.
Right.
But I mean, did I dread when I heard that Joe Hill was heading up a horror division for DC? I just about threw up. I kind of went, well, yeah, okay, I'm out of business, damn. But it's like, I like everybody to be good. It's like movies. I cheer everybody that makes a good movie, because that's just better for all of us. When someone buys a comic or goes to a movie and they have a great experience, they want more. So it's
Mhm.
like, bring it on. Come on. Everybody do a great job. Let's raise the bar.
Right. Yeah. And life is too short for art that love hasn't been poured into.
Yeah.
It's hard enough to find time to watch all the good movies and read all the good books and listen to all the good music.
Yeah.
Um, let's we don't need people that aren't trying as hard as they should. Let's all fill up our time with great art. It's not that hard.
Well, yeah, and the big deal is I cheer for everybody, and the big thing is to respect the audience.
Hmm.
Respect, respect it's a tough economy. If you're spending $4 on a floppy or $35 on a trade or $25 or whatever it is, respect that that's a hard-earned dollar.
Right.
And I want to show you a good time,
Hmm.
whether it's a movie ticket or a book. I want you to be so happy with what you got.
Right.
That's my goal. I want to have taken you somewhere, during that period of time and have you really pleased that you got that story, however I delivered it.
For sure. And that's the way we all should approach art, I feel like. Now, I have to ask, because I feel like I'm relatively ignorant to how these things get made. What is the typical process of creating a comic for you guys?
I'm beating my head against the wall. Um, the first thing I have to say is if it weren't for, uh, there's a guy that works with me, Sean Sobchak, who started out as a day runner on the movie Village of the Damned with me. So that's how long he's worked with me. If it weren't for him, nothing would get done. And um, he has really taken to the comic book side of what I do. And he is now essentially managing editor who wrangles the scheduling, the long term. We have to deliver um, books, the trades. Uh, the solicits are 8 months out now.
Wow.
And so we have this huge lead time, and we have to plan the next year's schedule, the year before.
Hmm.
Um, and if it weren't for him being a hound dog for that stuff, and him being one of the greatest persuaders and politicians, none of these books would get finished. And then, so I have to give him credit for a massive amount of work.
Right.
And there's another guy working for me, Antoine Johnson, who does the trailers and stuff. So we try and send those out to the comic shops and put them on the websites and do that stuff, because a bunch of what matters now is not just making the art, but how do you have awareness, how do you promote it, how do you give people a little glimpse into it.
Hmm.
So there's that aspect that's the whole, the scheduling, the marketing, that part of it. Then there's how do we get the stories and do all that. Well, some of the stories I create, some of them I write. On the anthologies, I always write, John always writes the first story, I always write the last one. In
Hmm.
between, we have a wide variety of writers and artists. So those are like the box of chocolates of horror. And I try and vary the writers every year, though I have a few regulars who throw tantrums if they don't get to be included. And they're so good, they don't have to throw too big a tantrum.
Right.
Though some of them, like David J. Scow, I throw challenges at. Like, I'll give him a piece of artwork from one of the the great artists like Nick Percival or Jason Felix or somebody and say, okay, write a story to go with this, and it has to be one page. It's a page. And he'll go, why? I wanted to. No, that's how you're in this year. So I'll do stuff like that, or I'll find a screenwriter or a novelist and ask them to do, I'll try and shake everybody up just a little. So one of my goals with the short stories was to bring in people from movies, comics, and novels. Can't have that. Thank you. He's hunting the tortilla. Um, uh, to give different textures to comics. Then I get them to submit 3 or 4 ideas. And either I choose, or if they're all great, I just say, okay, which one do you want to do the most? Because I'll find that it's whichever they want to do the most that'll come out the best.
Mm-hmm.
They do that, and if they have an artist they regularly like working with, we'll try and hook up with that artist. If they don't, like if they're a novelist and they haven't done comics, then I'll look at the tone of the story, and I will match them up with an artist that I think best suits their story. So that matching goes up.
Right.
And then it becomes a matter of deadlines. And we have who we call our in-house letterer, Janice Chang. I don't think you could do better than Janice as a letterer. She's done everything from Archie to Wolverine to our stuff. And she's also like another editor. This woman has some of the best judgment. Not only that, when I run out of ideas for sound effects, she knows she'll come up with stuff. We'll sit there, like on David Scow he uses guns a lot, and we have these big debates over sound effects for guns. And since we're not superheroes, we don't use a lot of kapows, so we have to do things like shattered glass sounds, and how do you make it more 3D with the smashes, and so all of those things become these big debates through each of the stories. And stuff like in Asylum, drawing messages or words in the sand. She even does that.
Wow.
So all of those textures, all of those things come into play at the different stages of doing each of the pages.
Right.
And then for, say, Tales from a Halloween Night, the interstitials are important to us, to have the transitions between stories, just because I like them.
Reason enough.
We had started out with the Gravedigger, and get out of there. He's drinking the water out of the Christmas tree. Lifestyles of the artist. And I then decided that it was more interesting to have a story that went along through. And so that's where the Carrillos came in, Harry and his sister, Anna, who do, Elena. One's his wife, Anna's the wife, Elena is the writer. And they're really great because they fight all the time, but they do fantastic stories together of Bastet the cat, who wanders through and is like a shapeshifter.
Right.
And so, in fact, Jaime just emailed me last night about lightening up his his artwork for next year. Um, we're always having these things between what the art looks like on the different computers, and are we all calibrated? These are the kinds of things. Are we all calibrated the same? How's it going to the printer? Is the printer calibrated the same? Trying to get test sheets back to make sure where we are so that it comes out pretty.
Right.
We do the same thing about the covers. Are they embossed? Do they have ghost images in them? I'm a big fan of foil, so it glitters. You know, I want to have the kind of books that you hide in the box under your bed.
Yeah.
You know, so all of those things are stuff we have going on year round.
Right. That sounds horrifying to me to know that if I had to, that's scary. That's really scary. If I had to be in charge of all of that, I would shrink completely. Now, before I keep you all day, I have to ask a couple of just things. One is because I'm a musician and your husband's a musician, your kids are musicians. I always have to know this for everybody. When you're turning on the radio, what do you like to listen to?
Well, you know, one thing that's been really, I think, sad for me, as opposed to when I was a kid and a teenager and even a young adult, used to be you could turn on a rock and roll station
Mm-hmm.
and you got everything. You got the Stones, you got the Beatles, you got Chuck Berry, you got Aretha, everything on one station.
Right.
And it wasn't all the same. The Yardbirds didn't sound like the Beatles.
Mm-hmm.
Cream didn't sound like the Rolling Stones. There wasn't one sound that all sounded the same.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't change channels to hear Bob Dylan versus Aretha.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's hard to find, even when you go to satellite and the Pulse and you know, various, I try and find something that'll give me a variety of music besides constantly going in, making a new playlist, you
Right.
know, seeing I mean, I'm listening, I look for rock and roll,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and half the time I'm still I mean, I really wonder if I'm like my parents' generation that only wanted to listen to Frank Sinatra. Because I'm like, okay, fine, you know, I'll make my own playlist of Cream and Led Zeppelin and you know, Janis Joplin. Um, you know, I just, you know, where can I get that? I'm a little frustrated that I can't get the variety.
Right.
I want to hear everybody.
Right. I get
Don't
it.
don't just decide that. I mean, just because I like Taylor Swift doesn't mean I don't want to hear, you know, Radiohead and everybody else.
Right.
You know, I'm blowing it. I'm trying to think of current rock and roll, but some of the current rock and roll, you know, you want to go. Listen, I can listen to synth all day in my house. You know, the Mr.
Mm-hmm.
Creator of synth. But even on my guys' music, there's heavy rock and roll coming through with Daniel's guitar and John's synth,
Right.
and you get the the backup guys with Scott Seaver's drums and stuff, and it's like it's more rock and roll than half the rock and roll coming out.
Yeah, for
You
sure.
know, and it's like I love Ed Sheeran and you know I love, but it's like I have to put together my own playlist to get it
Right.
changed up.
Right. I have a
So I
feeling
do,
our playlist
you
looks
know,
similar.
particularly on yeah, where you
Yeah.
shake it up. Who do
Yeah.
you like?
You know, I love it. Well, everybody that that you love, my influences were always, you know, Bruce Springsteen and Tom Petty and the Rolling Stones and Bob
Yeah,
Dylan and Paul Simon, and those were always the people that influenced me. Now, making music in a 2020 landscape, I feel like I kind of have to listen to everything and everybody, and so I branched out a ton. But basically, anything pre, 1990, I whatever kind of music it is, I've heard the majority of it. Just immersing as a songwriter and as a lyrical songwriter. That's where I get the most fulfillment from listening to people like Bob Dylan and Paul Simon, poets, really, Joni
yeah.
Mitchell.
When we were doing C2E2 in Chicago, I was dragging Antoine, one of my assistants, up to Rush Street because I said, you can go into any one of those joints along there and bars along there, and there's the best R&B
Mhm.
and blues going on, and has been forever. And
Mhm.
I loved all that stuff coming out of there. And when I did the movie Thief, Willie Dixon was in it. And I remember just sitting on the end of this pier with Willie Dixon. I'm going, God, I'm sitting next to a guy with a spoonful of sugar. And there used to be a place on Melrose here in LA called the Ash Grove. And they had everybody, Little Walter, Willie Dixon, B.B. King, Albert King, all of these guys
Right.
would be there. And it's just, I loved all of that, all the roots of what influenced all the guys that were doing rock and roll. And, I still like listening to that interspersed with everything else because it's
Yeah.
just like, it's got edge, it's
Yeah.
got rawness to it. And
Yeah.
stuff now gets a little too smoothed out for me sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
It's like I love some of those Rock and Roll Hall of Fame jams that happen where you get um, some of the great guitar players all up at the same time. That's why I like Lenny Kravitz because he still has edge.
Hmm.
Uh, you just want to hear stuff that pulls from Africa, that pulls from the Caribbean, that pulls from
Yeah.
all these other places, and gives you a little sex, gives you a little, like, stuff kind of got a little too clean for me.
Yeah.
It's like, give
For
me
sure.
give me some dirt, give me some something that makes you feel, that makes you
Right.
move.
Yeah. I mean, in the last 10 years, we all decided that, oh, we're going to make music with computers and it's going to be all programmed and everything. And then when you get that, there's none of those imperfections that make, you know, real human music just raw and exciting and energized. It's like when you have a record with a band on it and the drums are fake and the bass is fake and you've all done it yourself, and it's like this is a love song and I'm singing my heart out, but everything behind me is generated by me to be absolutely perfect. It starts, there's some kind of
Yeah.
disconnect there.
You want to take a little
Oh, there you go.
This is Mr. Bones.
He wanted
Uh,
in on the conversation.
excuse me. Come on here. Go on. Go on. So
It was great. He made an appearance.
he did. He did. Um, yeah, I mean, like on John's stuff, there's he's a big synth guy,
Hmm.
but there's always some live instruments inside
For
it.
sure.
There's always some guitar and some drums and some various things that are coming in and out. The recording studio is filled with a wall of guitars
Mm.
and all of that kind of stuff. And then, when he's performing live, I don't know if you've seen any of his shows, but there's him and Cody and Daniel, but there's also the same band that backs Tenacious D.
Right.
So it's, you know, um, uh, John Kineski and John Spiker and Scott Seaver.
Hmm.
And, that stage rocks
Right.
uh, because you've got all of it. and you've kind of taken the best of everything.
Yeah, and like you said before, there's intense variety from like, the scores from Halloween and The Fog feel so different than In the Mouth of Madness and Escape from LA and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Different styles of music, which is what I love about the way he writes and the way he scores. I have to ask, as someone who goes to conventions a lot, and that's a big tool for you. After COVID, how do you think these things are? What do you think these things are going to look like? How will they have changed? Once
I
we get
know
back to doing them. Yeah.
what I think and what I hope is that they learn from it what you can do to not make Hall H a nightmare. I think what they've learned, San Diego did a really good virtual con this year, by really planning better than I thought they would, how to do the panels. And they may be able to adapt that to making certain things that get too crowded and too frustrating for the fans. What can we do and bring from the COVID times and the virtual cons to enrich the live cons
Hmm.
and not make it such a hideously uncomfortable space?
Hmm.
I think we might be able to mesh the two experiences a bit and also be ready to pivot more easily, because this won't be the last time this happens. The bugs are getting stronger, weird things are happening. Let's figure out how we adapt for both situations. We don't need to make everybody miserable and unhappy that they can't get their ticket during the 2 hours the gates open.
Right.
I think we can do better. I think we don't have to treat people like cattle. I think we can make a lot of the panels, half virtual, half attended,
Hmm.
uh, and make the con experience better
Right.
and more respectful of the attendees.
Yeah.
So maybe we can learn from this.
Fingers
I don't.
crossed.
I'm not sure you'll ever be able to pack 350,000 people into Javits and
Hmm.
into San Diego again.
Right.
I just don't know. But maybe if we all use our brains, we'll have a life again and can all gather.
Fingers crossed.
If we
Fingers
stay
crossed.
stupid like Texas, I don't know what we're going to do.
Yeah, Florida's going up too. We'll get it together at some point. It's a shame that it has to be at the expense of tons of deaths for no reason. The key is people need to realize patriotism is taking care of your fellow American citizens and not believing your rights are being infringed on because you have to wear a mask. It's unpatriotic to walk around
Greater
with a
good.
mask on. Yeah, it's sad,
Greater good.
but what's next for you and for Storm King Comics? What's coming up?
Well, now we have night terrors. So that's going to be where the trades that are longer horror stories go. Whenever
Mhm.
there's a good story that isn't small and isn't a monthly sci-fi story, goes into night terrors. And uh, and then I think, I'm not DC. We're not going to expand infinitely.
Mhm.
I am a filmmaker, and so that'll take priority coming up.
Right.
And and mostly we just are going to put out what we think the fans like and what are good stories. I'm not just going to fill a quota.
Right.
So every year there will be a Tales for a Halloween Night, and there will still be the staples going on.
Right.
And right now we're starting to finally do the third arc of Asylum, and
Mhm.
we'll wrap that story up. But man, I don't know. We'll see what door opens next.
Right. I get it. Well, thank you so much for coming and doing this. I appreciate it so much. It was
it's
wonderful.
it's great to meet you.
It's great to meet you. Hopefully, we'll be able to meet each other in person sometime when the world returns to a normal state.
That would be great. Yeah, you take care.
You too. You have a good one.
Okay, bye bye.